I don't think that's his title, actually. Anyway, he's the head of SEER Interactive. He should be joining us shortly, but I'll get us started. So everyone, hello, welcome. I am Julie Zeglen, Weekly's Managing Editor based here in Philadelphia. We are here talking about the founder, the CEO, and the people, how company culture starts at the top. So the 20th century model often put labor. The 21st century model has made it everything but. No longer are elements like company culture, employer brand, and hiring strategies wonky add-ons for the personnel department. They are foundational to the success of companies. So we're going to talk about what that means and what you can take to your organization. So yeah, I'll let you all introduce yourself first. Josh, how about you go first? Oh, sure. Will's here. Hold on. Well, yeah, go ahead, Josh. But Will, I see you in the chat.
Hey, Will. So I'm Josh. I am a partner at a venture fund called First Round Capital. We earliest stages in emerging tech companies, offices in Philly, New York, and San Francisco. And before that, I was founder and CEO of 3 companies.
Thank you. Yeah, Christine.
Great. Hi, everyone. I head up people at Duolingo, the people function. And for those of you that may not be familiar with Duolingo, just in case, we're best known for our language learning app, which is the most downloaded educational app in the world with hundreds of millions of users. And it's free, and this is not a trick or an ad, but if you're learning a language or someone in your household is learning a language, or maybe you have dreams of one day traveling again, this is your chance. Make good use of quarantine and COVID. To go out there, download the app. And really the mission that we're after is to provide the best education in the world and make it universally available. So that's what we do. And Duolingo's headquartered on the west coast of Pennsylvania in Pittsburgh. And we have about 350 employees, most of whom are actually right in Pittsburgh.
Awesome. Thank you. We have someone in the chat who very impressively just hit their 365 days a week, which I know is impressive. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, sure. I'm Matt Gillen. I'm from the Philadelphia area, founder of a couple of startups here in Philadelphia. The first one was a company called eCount, sold to Citibank back in 2008. And for the last 10 years, a company called Relay Network, based in Radnor. And it's great to be here.
Thank you. Yeah. And Will, welcome. There's a dog behind you.
Yeah, it's Coltrane. Just hanging out. No, I'm Wil Reynolds. I'm a founder at SEER Interactive. We're basically a search marketing, social media marketing company based here in Philadelphia, a little under 200 folks with offices in Philly, San Diego, and a bunch of folks remote.
Are you guys back at work?
Just me and my dog.
I lost
and
you
my
at the
wife
end there.
sits over there.
Okay.
Nice.
I'm glad your dog could join us. All right, everyone, thank you. So everyone in the chat, please drop your questions. I'll refer to them throughout, but we'll get started. So you are all company leaders, if not founders. Let's talk, so this idea of culture in the first place. What does that mean to you, I guess? Let's just start sort of broadly like that. HR specifically used to be about compliance and legal issues, and now it is setting culture in a lot of ways. It's people ops is the new term that's being used, or Christine, your title has culture in it, or your chief people officer rather. So where did that come from, and what does that look like at your organization?
I'm happy to get us started, and you guys can all chime in. So yeah, it's been really great to see the evolution of HR over the years, and I purposefully don't use human resources anymore because it connotes and carries with it all that baggage from the past, being more compliance driven. And part of what I affectionately call the Business Prevention Committee, along with some other partners who shall not be named. But bottom line, that's not how we add value to the company anymore. And we really add value by thinking about how do we bring in the world's best talent? How do we motivate them, engage them, and give them a sense of belonging so that they can do their best work, create an environment where they want to stay for a really long time. And I've recently started saying until you retire. And what's really great is when I do onboarding for especially our new graduates and I say until you retire, their eyes get really big, which is awesome. But that's really what the people team is all about and how we can help and partner to make the company great And it's why I think that, we've moved to this idea of culture and engagement and belonging, because those are the topics that are so important. And the people team doesn't set the culture. The employees at the company set the culture. And it really comes down from the vision, usually of the founders and the environment that they create at the very beginning. And that's cascaded through the years and all the hiring that's done. And it's really through the people's behaviors, their values and beliefs that culture gets transmitted. And if those behaviors go off the rails, and we've seen a few examples of that over the years recently, then the company has significant reputation risks. So, I really see my role in helping to make sure that we live our values and beliefs, and we make sure that everything that we do aligns with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Josh, you may or may not remember this, but at one of your summits a couple of years back, one of the things was culture. And they say that the culture usually takes on the personality of the founder, the CEO. And I found that to be true. But what's really cool, now that I'm in my third company, is it's not really just the CEO, but it's the team around them. And, I find that to be true at Relay. One of the questions you ask is, can you learn how to install culture? Absolutely, there's a way to do it. But I think the best culture is the culture that is authentically coming from the people who run the company. And that shows up every day. And I think it also really shows up in times of difficulty. And if you have incredible culture, the productivity is off the charts. And I know, I'd be interested in your opinion, Josh, on it, but people look at culture first as one of the key ingredients, because it makes a huge difference in your ability to retain people. The way we look at it at Relay is every person that we interview and bring into the company, we feel it's our obligation to meet them, to give them the challenge. They have one life to live, and they're giving years of that life to our company, and we want to meet them to the challenge. And the challenge is, how can we get where we're going together and give everything we have? And then you find the people that want to sign up for that, and the rest usually takes care of itself.
Yeah, Josh would love to hear.
No, I think we're going to have a big agreement fest. To some degree, culture fills in a lot of the uncertainties. When someone has a task or a job to do, they know what they have to do, but often culture tells them how to do it. And it's the type of thing which, right, if there is a shared sense of culture, along with a shared sense of mission and values, it enables everyone to have so much more agency and ownership over what they do, because there's a set of shared values, a set of alignment, and so I agree that it originates from the founder, but that's typically because the founder is the first person in the company. Mm-hmm. But the best cultures are every time the team expands, the culture is like a draft, goes from draft 1.0 to 1.1 to 1.1 to 1.2. Yeah. It's a living, breathing, embodiment of the team.
Interesting point on that is, with all that's going on in society right now, obviously the employees have a lot to reflect upon. And one of the things we recognized in our values was we didn't have diversity. And, we created our values 10 years ago, and they're all the things you expect from a startup. And we hadn't really been reviewing them either. But in today's day and age, we're reviewing them. The employees, Josh, to your point, are making sure we're reviewing them. And now we're in the process of reviewing them and coming up with new ones. And it's been really amazing to watch this exercise unfold, and to have these new employees and people from all walks of life creating these values that we can all, adhere to. So it's been a very interesting time from a culture perspective.
Yeah, I want to touch more on that for sure. But Will, I want to hear if you have anything to add in there.
I was taking notes, and as I don't want to add to the agree fest. So the only thing I'll say is, for me personally, I tend to look at culture through all the lenses that were just mentioned. But it's like, I really feel the personal responsibility of leading by example. You know, I just finished meeting with all of our interns, and I meet with every new person when they start at SEER in small groups, and I talk to them about why I started the company, so they can hear it from my mouth and not filtered through something else. And I remind them that, like, I didn't want to run a company. I didn't want to start a business. Like, I was volunteering at a hospital, and I couldn't. My boss wouldn't let me work through my lunch, so I could go to CHOP and volunteer with sick kids on Wednesdays. And then that enables me to say, like, that's why you have to volunteer, right? Because people are like, oh, I hear about SEER and your volunteer culture and yada, yada, yada. But I think it's so important for me, at least, to try to instill that in people within, like, the first 2 weeks that they start. And also, I love the fact that culture to me is accessibility to your executives, right? Like, to me, the kind of culture I want to build is one where people don't feel like, can I talk to Will? And I'm like, if I can talk to an intern in their first week of being at SEER, then hopefully that will make them feel that much more comfortable from the beginning onward. So it's what you do with your time, because anybody can say anything about their culture, but really, I think today especially, people are looking at their founders and being like, do we really care about those things that are in that book? And I think that's been tough. That's been really tough.
Yeah, something that I'm very curious about, especially for among you who have founded companies. Many people, I'm sure, do not found companies with the intention of also being like the beacon of culture or something that grows to have many, many employees. They're probably thinking, like, I have this great idea for a company. I need to start hiring people so that I can make it happen. And of course, if that's not your thinking, please do share that. But if you don't go into starting a company and you're not thinking about culture from the outset, there is still a culture that forms, whether you plan it or not. That's based on whoever you hire and how comfortable they feel there. So I guess I want to hear a little bit about how that shapes over time, I suppose. I guess, can culture be a learned strategy? So if a founder doesn't go into founding a company with people in mind, is the company doomed, or can they learn?
I mean, I think the fact that you start small and usually against great odds, by its very nature, sets a type of culture and attracts a type of person. And then I think as you kind of move through those stages, and I would say you're probably, at least in the first company, we weren't thinking about culture too much. And you know, we were kind of, and then you wake up one day and you realize there's like borderline chaos going on in your organization because you weren't thinking about the culture. And, you know, when we started our second company, we thought about culture right off the bat. And we definitely, you have this vision in your head, whether you can articulate it or not, as to what a high functioning, you know, place that you want to take 2 steps at a time going to work. What does that feel like? What does that look like? And so I would say, you know, maybe the first time around, we kind of woke up and realized that there was a culture and we didn't have anything to do with it. But the second time around, we really tried to, you know, build it from the start.
I think also culture is not what you put on paper, but how you live and how you operate. So I've seen many work hard, play hard cultures that are really just work hard. And you know, and they write work hard, play hard, but like they don't. And so I think that it's far more driven by action, and it's also driven by boundary testing, right? Like what happens when someone goes outside the bounds of what and organization respond, you know, and is to the deviations that truly define the culture.
Yeah, would love to hear if anybody has any examples of that, and you don't need to obviously call out specific people in that scenario, but what do you do when that happens, when somebody, yes, goes outside, to use that broad sort of phrasing, goes outside the norms of your culture, and it needs to be addressed. And I mean,
yeah, this probably falls into my lap a lot in terms of my role. So one old definition of culture that I really liked is this idea that the culture that you set is really defined by the worst behavior that you will tolerate. And so I think, you know, when you do have those things that happen, and it's natural, just, you know, we're all human beings, you know, things are going to happen where they are outside of bounds. It's how you treat that situation, how you treat those people. And then, you know, depending on the egregiousness of it, are those things used as an example in your telegraph to, in your culture to further telegraph the behaviors that you're looking for. So, you know, I think it's really important to deal with them when they come up in a really open, transparent way. That's what we try to do. And I also want to just circle back on the whole learn strategy part, because I feel like there is this narrative of, you know, we expect CEOs, founders, and leaders to be these, you know, perfect humans that are fully formed and able to scale a huge company, just, you know, and grow along with it, just like everyone else. And I think the reality is that founders and CEOs are just humans too, perfectly fallible, just like all of us. So I think this idea of, you know, being transparent about the things that you're not great at and what you're striving to be better at and how you're not perfect and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. And I think if you are honest about those things, then that again feels authentic to people inside the company, so that when you make a mistake, because you will, when you step outside of your lived values and on occasion you slip up, you say something you didn't mean to, you know, you're hungry, angry, tired, you know, whatever the HALT acronym is, you know, something happens and you kind of go outside of who you want to be at work. All of us do that on occasion. I think as long as you have that base of authenticity and trust, people will go with you. They'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But I think it's important to kind of bring people along your own personal growth journey. Luis, my CEO, you know, very early on started out with a coach. He has done a 360. He shared the 360 with the entire company, which is like super brave, but that's what he did. So he's super transparent about like, look, here's what you said. And these are the things that I'm working on. So I think it's also important to acknowledge that none of us are perfect as well.
Yeah. Will, I know that you've been interviewed by Technically about speaking about fear. Is that something, so I know that that's something that comes up a lot for you as well, right?
Well, totally. I mean, it's so interesting to hear Christine talk about that because I just got out of a meeting an hour ago with all of our new hires, and the way I end before the Q&A, I literally tell them, here are the list of things I suck at. Some of these things I'm not proud of, but it's how my mind works. Like my mind, and one of the things I tell them is I tend to look for who's at fault instead of fixing the problem. That's how my mind is wired. But what comes out of my mouth, I have a chance of changing. And I said, if you see me, because something's on fire, that I'm saying who set the fire, you have every right to remind me to put the fire out, and we'll figure that out later. And if I'm telling that to interns when they first start, the reason why I do that and the way I leave it with them is after I go through my list of things I suck at, is I then say, I'm here to help you get better at things. And when I see them, I'm going to be like, hey, I think this is an opportunity for you to improve. But you probably haven't worked somewhere where somebody told you in your first week, it's also your job to help make me better. They're like, sure, I can say that. So I try to grease those wheels. Nobody does it anyway. But at least I try to grease those wheels. And I tell them that, look, if you see me doing something and you whisper to your neighbor, you heard it and they heard it from me, because I say it to every single person that starts. I know I suck at these things and I need your help to get better at them.
Yeah, thank you. Someone wants to know about the Red Bull story or the energy drink story.
I don't know, Kat, how do you know this? So I used to go to, before there was grocery delivery, I would finish my work day, long day of work, and I would go food shopping, and I would ask the team what they wanted me to pick up so I could stock the fridge. And we ended up spending like $5,000 in Red Bull, and only like 8 people were drinking it. And when I talk to the team about that, I say that's why I don't run the company anymore, because sometimes I'm so into making sure that people are enjoying the space and all that, that it's like, I don't wake up to think about the numbers and the financial stuff. And like, that's actually not good for you long-term, because that's how companies go out of business, is a founder with a great idea may not necessarily see that idea through because they weren't monitoring the finances and whatnot. So yeah, we had a year where we spent like $5,000 in Red Bull. My CFO, when I first hired him, he was like, you spent $5,000 on Red Bull this year, right? And there's only like 4 or 8 people who are drinking it in the office. I was like, no, thank you very much. So yeah, that's it. That's the Red Bull story.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Kat, for bringing that up also.
I don't know how she knows that.
But yeah, so that is great, and that makes me think too about shifting a bit, I guess. But like, Matt, this is something that you alluded to, and you as well, Will. Like, people telling you that you're not doing a great job as a leader, and then having to correct. So that is something that has come up very publicly for many companies this year, and the last couple of months of like call for racial justice publicly, amid COVID as well. I mean, lots of layoffs and things like that. There have been a lot of, public outings of leaders who fired people very poorly or laid people off very poorly. But anyway, so I'm curious we're talking a lot about top-down culture, but how culture rises from employees. So do you have specific processes in place, or is there something specific that you all implemented that came from somebody telling you like, hey, this isn't working and you need to fix it? Like, you as leadership need to figure it out. Matt, you are on mute. Yeah.
A little bit on the mature side for a CEO finding now. And I was blown away with this company by the generation below me and how they engage in the workplace. And it's really been interesting and helpful. The thing I noticed right off the bat is they have an opinion on everything, and they will tell you how you're doing, which was amazing, because, here I am sitting with people a year on the job, and the truth be told, they were right in what they were saying. I liked the fact they said it, but I didn't like hearing it. But I did admire their willingness to do it. And it's different from how I was raised. It was, you don't question the authority. It was how I was raised. I'm one of 9 kids, and you just come in and you do your time. So it's really interesting to see the opportunity now for people to come in and have an impact culturally. And how you deal with that feedback is important. The other thing that I've found is, to Josh's point earlier, and I think Will's as well, the way it rises from the bottom up is by hiring the right people and just watching them go. We have just recently, we closed a round of funding, and we're doing a lot of hiring right now. And some of these people that we've brought in have had such an impact right off the bat. So we had a sales organization which could sell but wasn't built to scale. This one been with us for 2 months. All of a sudden, we're seeing daily reports of activity, and we're starting to say, oh, maybe that's why the end result wasn't there, because we're not doing the daily result. And basic stuff, the discipline to put it in place really changed the culture of that department, and it's going to start to change the results of the company. So that's the way culture and change really happens, by bringing in the right people and just watching them go.
Mm-hmm. How about the rest of you? Being told that something isn't working by employees, making changes, or just, even what is the process that exists or has you've been forced to make?
I'm laughing because this happens every day. People tell us that something isn't working and they want to change, to Matt's point. So, we have the formal feedback channels that, lots of companies have, engagement surveys. We just wrapped up one. I think another thing that our CEO does is, we set up these kind of informal culture carrier kind of folks that he goes to and asks all the time, like solicits feedback. Hey, what's going on with this specific thing? What are your thoughts on product review and how we can make it better? Hey, what did you think of that most recent event that we did? Was it good? Did you like it? What are you hearing from, your new hires? Or he meets with all the interns, when they start, and then he meets with them again 4 to 6 weeks later, and he gets feedback from them. Hey, how's your internship going? So, making sure that you have those listening posts set up, formal, informal, that kind of mix. And then I think the other kind of point here is when do you need to collect more information? Because, none of us really enjoys when you hear this one data point and then it's like a leap to action based on that one data point. That still happens. But I think that the trick there is, when you have enough information that you feel like it's the time to act and you can act in an authentic way that's true to your culture, then that's the time to make a change. And again, I think in this day and age, it is just a very kind of bottom up thing that is now happening. Employees expect that we're going to be listening to their voice. And yeah, we still have an opportunity to shape things from the top down through, the structures that we set up, how we onboard people, of course, how we hire people, what are those values or the operating principles that we put in place. But it really is that bottom up listening that is going to shape the company in the long term.
I'd be interested, Josh, if, from your perspective as a venture capitalist now, and, you sit on a lot of boards, and you can probably spot right away when a company's really suffering from culture. What have you seen that can work quickly to change culture outside of maybe chopping off the top guy? Like, what do you see that could work there?
So look, I'm not that easy to diagnose bad culture. It's easy to diagnose bad communication. Bad culture is a little bit harder to diagnose, I'd say. It's easy to spot great culture.
Mm-hmm. What is that? And so how do you spot, how do you spot it?
I mean, I think it comes from, you can see how transparent is everyone inside the organization, what's being communicated, what's not, what's being shared. Are people credit givers or credit takers at a board level? You can see things like that.
Yeah.
But in general, my sense is that the best cultures are written by the teams and perhaps edited by leadership, rather than the other way around.
When you notice that a company that you're thinking of investing in seems to not have a good leadership or good culture, or doesn't have that transparency that you mentioned, does that affect, how do you consider that as you're thinking about investing in them?
It's hard because we typically invest in companies often before they have employees.
True.
So, yeah.
So you that is fair. So we have a question about, can you have great culture but bad top leadership?
Yeah, I was wondering that when you said that. To me, it'd probably be pretty hard to have good culture with bad leadership. But I don't know. What do you think, Will?
I think it's easy for me to agree with that, so I'm trying to not. Because what it is culture is undefined. I mean, culture is different for each person. So I think it probably is possible. Like if you put me into a certain culture with a certain type of leadership, it might not work for me. So it's bad culture for me. I would not say it's a bad culture because there's hundreds of thousands of people that work there. So who am I to say it's a bad culture? They must like it, or maybe it's the kind of culture where it's we treat people not great, but we pay them a ton or whatever. I don't know.
I also think there's a difference between what defines bad leadership. Like, you could have bad leadership because you don't set clear enough company goals and you're more absentee, in which case your team might have created a great culture to execute and to move things and make decisions without you. Like, there are ways that you can have AWOL or absentee leadership, and a good culture can play a big role in that.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. And attendees, drop your questions in the chat. We are reading them live. Somebody just suggested that you could have strong middle management creating that good culture. True. Political divide, influence levels, groupthink, indeed. Paige, you dropped this question earlier. Has the pandemic pushed those boundaries in a different way you've experienced before? Has it helped or hurt your definition of culture? I think you're referring to something specific from earlier in the conversation about boundaries. So if you want to clarify that, drop that in. But yeah, we'd love to hear about the last 6 months. I mean, obviously, we talk a ton about going remote, and that isn't the only thing that has to do with company culture. It does change how company culture happens, certainly during the pandemic. But what have your last 6 months looked like, and have they taught you anything different about what culture means for your company?
Maybe I'll give an example. So, we didn't realize how office-centric our culture was. In other words, how all of the office cues kind of fed in and reinforced our culture. I'll give you a really super tactical example. So on Mondays, we have all hands, and Wednesdays we have Q&A. And in the office, everybody gets up and we all walk to the all hands area, and that's where the meetings happen. And so it's obvious that everyone goes to the meeting. It never occurred to us after we went remote that we had to tell people, you have to go to the meeting. We thought, well, it's obvious that this is the way we do things, and you'll get the invitation, and it's clear that you should go to the meeting. So down to that tactical level of having to communicate in orientation on day one, hey, we have this meeting, you should go. Here's why. So it's all those little things, all those tiny reinforcing cues that we were getting just in that office environment, and now not having them, and think about how to then create that remotely and what that looks like, because I doubt that we will ever go back to that fully. We were very office-based, meaning we didn't have a lot of people who were remote, and working from home was like not a thing. So you were expected to be in the office. We fed you lunch, we have massages, like we gave you all the bells and whistles so that you'd come, so that we have this nice collaborative environment. I think that the world post-COVID is going to look very different from that. So, we have to be much more intentional about the culture that we want to create, instead of almost lazily relying on the office and some of those live cues.
Yeah.
I think those points are spot on. And I think the other thing that I've been thinking about is, when you're in a global pandemic, everyone kind of bonds together. There's really no choice. You're not going to the office. So the office is essentially shut down. So it was easy for everyone to kind of bond together. I thought productivity and morale was incredible. And it really did have a esprit de corps element to it. And once you have to make a decision about going back to work, now you have real decisions to make. And all of a sudden, it's not everyone in the same boat, because I got news for the tech guys, and I keep joking with them. They don't want to come back, and they're loving working from home. And I think it's going to become a key strategic thing to be able to offer going forward, even though it was before, but it's accelerated now. So it's going to be different. And the question is, as a company, what do you want to do? How important is it for you to be in an office space together? I do think that our dependency upon the space for our culture, and for me in particular, it's taken a hit a little bit. The culture's taken a little bit of a hit, and we're looking for ways to, like we're doing now, instead of being at an event, we're looking for ways to augment and continue to drive it. And we're trying all types of things, but it's definitely going to be different. And I think the fact that we're not, we're kind of coming out and having to make decisions, you're starting to have people have choice as to what they want to do.
Yeah, actually, in the last panel that I was moderating, it was about creating innovation in a non-tech environment. Naveen from Clorox was talking about the importance of buy-in, and that he was specifically talking about buy-in for an innovative culture. But I think that applies across the board, and something that I've experienced as a manager as well, that there are a lot of decisions that need to have everyone's input, or maybe not everybody's, but you need to give people a heads up early on. So it's not just like, all right, we leadership decided this is happening, because it's something that affects everybody and their daily workflow and how they get their work done. So especially in this type of environment where you can't have a face-to-face conversation, or it's just something that's more sensitive, introducing topics earlier I found is important, and getting feedback whenever possible. Even if it doesn't mean that something is changing, it still helps people to feel like they're not blindsided when things change.
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
Oh, you go, brother.
All right.
That's good culture.
One of the things I saw, we've seen, we've been fortunate, we work with a couple hundred companies that we funded, and had the ability to sort of see who has thrived and who has struggled as they've gone to work from home. And saw some interesting trends. Of it had to do with rate of new hiring. So if you were a company with 15 employees March 7th, and they were working together as a team for 6 months, 12 months, whatever, and you said, let's go home and work from home, a lot of them were working without missing a beat. They already had, they knew the ins and outs, the routines, they knew where people would be and what people would be doing. And yet, when we've had companies that, that we funded in February, and they had 2 employees in February, and now they have 15 employees because they've ramped pretty aggressively over the last 7 months, they have really struggled. And in general, I think it has to do a lot with sort of the percentage of your team that you're bringing on new in any given quarter and your ability to assimilate and absorb and spend the time to make sure they like how work gets done, how people communicate, what are the right Slack channels for what, and so I think we've seen that the rate of team addition, that companies historically could onboard more people faster and without than they can in a work from home environment.
Yeah.
And maybe, Josh, I'll just add on to that a little bit. So at Duolingo, historically, we've grown headcount about 45% a year over year for the past 8 years. This year, we grew at 80%. And so to your point, this was a year of rapid acceleration for us, partly because our business is doing really well, in part due to COVID. And then the other side of it is there's incredible talent in the marketplace that we're being opportunistic and trying to snap up. And so we've grown incredibly quickly this year. And I think part of the reason that we've been able to, maintain a lot of the solid culture. So we just did our engagement survey where our employees are as engaged as they were a year ago, which again, in this environment is pretty something. Our new hire onboarding results are as good pre-COVID as they are today, even with the all remote kind of onboarding. And so some of it, I think, is going back to how intentional were the founders when they set up the company. And I know that founders are busy with lots of, life or death decisions at the very outset of the firm. But I really do want to put culture on the radar. So I really want people to be thinking intentionally about what is this environment that you want to create? How do you want people to work together? And I'll just, again, give you a really tactical example. So Luis and Severin, our co-founders, they really set out to say, we want a place that's fun. We spend a lot of our life at work, and we want to look forward in the morning when we wake up to going to work every day. So we do not want to create a culture that, like, you wake up and you're like, oh God, I have to go, be with these people. And so they took everything from the initial hiring decisions, on down the line super seriously. They were very thoughtful about it. And I think a lot of that DNA helped us absorb all of that quick growth this year. Look, it's not perfect. It's far from that. But, I really want founders to be thinking of this, incredibly early on, probably way earlier than you think you should or you should have to.
And just a few things that I'll add to that. I was always a little bit surprised by how afraid people were. Like, that was something that was really interesting to me. And it reminds me of something I've talked about for a long time. But it's that, like, I know what's in the bank. So therefore I'm like, guys, we're fine. Like, we're good, right? And it's like, what happens is there's like, there's what you know, and then what your team knows, and they're always going to think they're going to draw a line from this to this. So the more transparent you are, the more you have defense against things just being made up and rumored. So we've been very transparent. We created like 4 phases. We're like, phase 1, cut and travel, whatever, blah blah blah. It was a whole list of things. Phase 2, this. Phase 3, layoffs. Phase 4, this, whatever it is. And every week, I think it was every week, Emily Allen, our head of people, was emailing the team saying, we're in phase 2, we're in phase 3. Our revenue is this, our money in the bank is this, or this is that. So it almost helps people in those moments of fear. But so often we know we're good, but we don't give our team members the thing that helps them know that they're good. So that was one thing I wanted to share. And the other thing that somebody said to me that I was like, oh my God, this is so true. And I think all of us need to watch out for this. We had a hybrid company. So we were maybe 10 or 15% remote. And what someone said to me was, you may spike your remote turnover when you go back to the old way, because they just got to feel what it was like to be on an even playing field with everybody. So before, they got used to that bad room with the freaking bad camera and the what? They just got used to it. But then all of a sudden, they got rid of all that and saw how great it was. So I think all of us as leaders need to be very cognizant that if you had people, if you were in a hybrid world before, that you need to, or at least for us, we're leaning into remote first for everything. No conference rooms with anybody in it. If there's one person remote, all those kinds of things, because it's going to really feel worse when you go from what, to like, oh my God, everybody's the same. And it's going to feel even worse than it was back when it was what, if you go back to the old way. So just something to consider.
I'm just kidding. Wow. So we're talking a lot about, I think, what should be a very basic concept, which is treat people how you want to be treated, treat people how, like, to make them feel like they want to work here and they're valued. Somebody brought up specifically scrolling individual contributors. What can they do to maintain?
Oh, I love this question. Oh, sorry, I have a particular passion about this.
Awesome. What can individual contributors do to help maintain workplace cultures they love during periods of rapid growth, especially during COVID and being fully remote means we don't get to know our new team members in the same way?
I mean, this is how great cultures are sustained, right? You have these culture carriers that really care about the culture that's been built and developed. And so we need individual contributors to basically be leaders in the company, right? Step up and take those extra steps to get to know new hires, set up those one-on-ones over Zoom, even though I know it can be awkward, but really leaning into getting to know people, helping them make friends, especially virtually. We've heard from a lot of folks that joined the company this year, especially new graduates, hey, I didn't expect to be working by myself in my bedroom that I was raised in, like with my parents next door. So they're clamoring for connection and friends. And so you can really help fill that void. I think another thing that we saw, another great example of kind of culture carriers in action is, we do this open Q&A every Wednesday. People can submit questions anonymously. And there was a question that we got that was, the tone was a little bit not Duolingo. It was a little sharper, a little more blunt than what you typically see in our channels and forums. And one of our long tenured employees stepped in and just said, hey, the tone of this doesn't exactly read like Duolingo. And then, she gave her reasoning of why. And it sparked this entire other conversation that was so Duolingo because, we hire a lot of folks where English is not their first language. And so it sparked this whole conversation about how, bluntness can be taken in lots of different connotations, especially when, you're using English maybe differently than others, and that we should all give each other a little grace in that. And it was this beautiful cultural moment. So, that was all sparked from an individual contributor. So, they play such a key role in carrying on culture. So, lean in, we need your help too.
Yeah. As you're talking, and I'm just thinking back over the last 10 years at Relay and how many times the culture has changed just based upon certain people's that have worked there, their beliefs and their attitudes and their actions. And, we've had times where the culture wasn't great. And, the last couple of years, it's been fantastic. And it really comes down to the people and how they care for one another, respect one another, and talk honestly to one another. And, we had periods of time where that wasn't the case. And man, it takes a while to figure out what's going on, but you can just feel it when you walk in when your culture's not right. And, it's not fun. It's not a fun time when you don't have the culture right. And, to our discussion earlier, Josh, a couple people with the wrong attitudes or the wrong DNA and sour the culture quick. And when they go,
True.
It's like, whoa, it's sunny outside. The people have that's how individuals have such an impact on the culture, particularly in a small company. We're 50 people, and a leader who's got the wrong core values, beliefs, or demeanor can really tank the place.
Yeah, we're at time, horrifyingly, but let's wrap up. I would love for everybody to share a tweet link. I guess let's say piece of advice for founder. So like maybe Josh, like the companies that you do work with that don't have any employees yet, what's something that you want them to know about building that culture, making sure that it's healthy, it's going to grow well and scale, and everybody else as well. Some advice for new founders.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, culture is not what you decide to put on paper, but it's how you act, how you behave, what you reward, what you choose to ignore, and how you choose to communicate, much more than what you say.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Matt?
Oh, I thought we were all just listening to Josh there.
Everyone.
I would probably add to that, as Josh was saying that, it's not a right or wrong. It doesn't need to be judgment on what the culture is. For example, you may ignore certain things that other places wouldn't, but if it's authentically who you are as a team, then it's fine. So long as that you can get the job done. So I guess I would tell them the authenticity. If you're starting a company, you gotta be authentic. Period. That's it. Because the authenticity is going to drive. If you're a hard worker, you're a hard worker. If you're lazy, you're lazy. So just be as authentic as you can to the situation.
How about you, Will?
Yeah. If I was to give broad advice, which I try usually not to do, it's be honest with yourself. And what I mean by that is, one of the things I love about what I heard Matt say is it's really hard. He said a couple things. One of them was, he was like, my first company, we didn't really prioritize culture. Most people would never say that on a meeting like this about culture, even if they thought it, right? And then he even just said just now, he was like, oh yeah, the last 3 or 4 years, we really kind of got it. But those first few years, it just didn't feel right. I think most founders, they want to self-justify what's going on around them because it makes them feel better. Oh, it was it wasn't really me. Like, I wasn't really, and I think that we all do this. And the better you can capture that and understand when you're giving yourself that self-justification and you're not really listening to the fact that maybe your culture had some bumps along the way, and you're able to admit that, I think then you're constantly going to be self-justifying, which means you're going to only surround yourself with people who are going to tell you you're right. And then your culture never gets better. So just make sure that you can be in tune with yourself. And Matt, respect, brother. Appreciate that, man. It's hard to do.
Christine?
Yeah, maybe two things, kind of echoing a lot of what was just said. Be intentional. Really give it some thought. It's as important. I know that the bottom line is really important. You're thinking about payroll and where you're going to get your lunch money from. I get it. This is as important because it's going to be the lasting piece for your company. So be intentional about it. Start early, and then ask for help. Like, get a coach. Sometimes it's hard to hold yourself in check. Sometimes you don't have that lens. You've got those blind spots. Get someone that can be a mirror, that can help you work through that stuff. I hate to be hippy dippy up on you folks today, but do the work. Do your own work. We all have our plenty of work to do. Founders have a lot of work to do. Lean into that because it will pay dividends and it will help you and your company grow at the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Christine, Matt, Josh, Will, for joining. And thank you, Pennies, for your great questions. Everyone, please head on over to the main stage. We're going to be hearing from Guy Ross, who will be interviewed by Chris Lang. Yeah.
See you guys.
There.